Welcome, everyone, to Successful Iranians podcast. And we're going to have some chai and conversation with the one and only Leyla Shams. How are you?
I'm good. I have a confession to make, though. I'm having coffee. I don't know about you.
I am having tea, but
قهوه.
not
So
Iranian
قهوه میخوام.
style tea. You know, when they have the big sugar cube and they put in, well, my family, they put in their mouth and stuff like that. And then the tea, I have green tea. I like green tea.
Well,
And
so
in the UK, we love tea. In the UK, we
exactly.
love
So do
tea.
you ever put your milk in your tea?
No, that's disgusting. But in the UK, obviously, they always put their milk in the tea. But for me, it's just green tea, tea bag, hot water, not for too long. Um, have about 3 cups a day. But yeah, I can't do without my tea. But even when you refer to meetings, it's weird. When you email someone, you don't say like a quick tea. You always say something like a quick coffee,
Right?
even though I don't like coffee. But
Oh,
you
yeah.
obviously do. Yeah.
I love
Um,
coffee. I like both. Chai, قهوه, conversation. I love it.
yeah. I mean, in Europe, especially Italy and Spain, they're big on their coffee, aren't they? You know,
Hmm.
big coffee drinkers. So, what are we talking about today? We're not talking about tea, although we might do at some further point. We're talking about the Persian language. And Layla has amassed a significant following talking all things Persian. First of all, when I did a content piece around Iran and Persia, etc., and when I said, Iranians are not Arab and Iranians don't speak Arabic, they speak Persian. And then I had some comments in the chat saying, no, 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 it's Farsi, it's not Persian. And I said, okay, both are right. Locally is known as Farsi in terms of the language that's spoken by people in Iran. Foreign speakers, especially in the English language, refer to it as Persian. It's a bit like Deutsch and German or Spanish and Espanol. Am I right or am I right?
You want to start on a spicy note? Okay, let's
Yeah,
get right
let's
into
start.
it.
Let's get
So,
spicy.
so I come from an academic background. I went to the University of Texas, where we have a big Persian studies program, and we had a professor here who was so adamant that we use the word Persian because we'd come into university and we'd say, "Okay, I'm taking a Farsi class," and thinking, we were so in it, like we know the real name of the language, and he'd be like, no, when you're speaking English you refer to it as Persian. And I have to admit, I was pretty annoyed at that point. I was thinking, well, okay, it was called Persian in the English language for a long time, but now people recognize the word Farsi. What is wrong with us just saying Farsi? What's wrong with that? And I started this podcast in 2010, so I've been doing it for what, 14 years now.
Well,
And over time, my views on this have come to change a little bit and evolve. And I am more on the side of my professor of understanding why it is so important that in the English language, we refer to it as Persian. Because just as you're saying, uh, you both are understood. Farsi is understood, Persian is understood, and people have very strong feelings about this. Every time I post something, every time I say, uh, you know, I'd made a decision in the beginning to call my podcast Learn Persian with Chai and Conversation, just because I was like, well, this professor said this, I'm just going to do this. But every time I make a post, I also get so many comments of people saying, it's Farsi. Why not Farsi? And one of the things that people do is they say, why don't we teach them that the right word is Farsi? So this comes up a lot. So even if English speakers know it is Persian, why don't we teach them? Well, the Ministry of Culture and Language in Iran even has put out, even the Islamic Republic has put out a 4-page statement saying, hey, when you're speaking English, please refer to this language as Persian. Why? Because for centuries, the language has been called Persian in English, and it has a history. It's not just a word that's come out of nowhere. We know that the language Farsi actually in Iran used to be called Parsi because when Arabic was introduced into Iran, they didn't have the p sound, so then they started calling it Farsi. So Persian relates back to that ancient word of Parsi, and it shows the history of our language. It shows the history of our culture in the West, in other countries. And when you're saying Farsi, you're erasing all of that history. The reason the word Farsi is even recognized is because there's been so many people in the diaspora, after 1979 that have come to the West, and amongst ourselves we call it Farsi. And so this language has been introduced. But what this does is it really erases that history. So even in Iran, the Ministry of Culture has said, please refer to it as Persian when you're speaking English. And I completely agree. I understand what they're saying.
Great minds think alike, in terms of you and I, not the Islamic Republic talking about
No,
it.
no.
In
It's not.
ter-
Let me say, wait. I shouldn't say the Islamic Republic said this. I should say the Ministry of Culture. So there's a lot of people working in Iran right now that I don't want to pin Islamic Republic on them.
so Farsi comes from the region of Fars, yeah?
Yes.
And when it comes to Persian as such, it came from the old Persian word Parsa, which refers to the people that lived in Persis in southwestern Iran. Is that right in terms of the background facts?
That I don't know. I don't know.
You learn something every day. Every day is a school day, folks.
Mm,
But it's the oldest Indo-European language, right? It dates back to 500 BC.
right.
And is that why, in terms of that whole concept, people sometimes get confused about Indo-European? What does that actually mean?
Well, it's I don't you're going to ask me technical questions. I'm not sure. I just let me tell you about my podcast. I'm not a linguist. I'm not a like historian. I studied architecture. And the reason I started this podcast actually was because all the language resources for learning Persian were very technical and they taught formal Persian. And there wasn't any resource for someone like you and I, someone in the diaspora. I grew up in the United States, but for people like us to just learn how to converse with Iranians and use the words that everyday Iranians use or everyday, you know, that people actually use. Because I don't know if you've studied Persian. I don't know how your Persian language skills are, but written Persian is very different than spoken Persian, and all the resources teach just written Persian. So when you go to actually talk, you sound completely ridiculous. So I don't I'm not a linguist or a historian. So if you want to ask me historical questions, I'm not
No,
gonna.
no, I just find it fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it is very
obviously
fascinating.
for people that maybe don't know about, the,
Well, I will say
everything comes from history, doesn't it, in terms of
like
origins?
we have
Um,
about 40% of our words in Persian are loan words from Arabic. A lot of
yeah,
them are. But Arabic, for example, is a Semitic language. It has a completely different root system. The wonderful thing about Persian being Indo European is that an English speaker has a very easy time just diving into Persian because there's so many similar roots. There's so many similar, like, for example, the word dokhtar in Persian means girl, and daughter in English, they have the same root. Like, think of how daughter is spelled. It has that GH in there, and we don't really know where it comes from. We just call it daughter. But dokhtar in Persian, it has that sound. So they have the same root. So that's what's interesting about Persian being Indo-European is it has the same roots as like all these languages that we're familiar with, Spanish, German, all these languages that we know.
it's like the word paradis, meaning paradise, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
And there's quite a few of those kind of overlaps. A language does overlap amongst different cultures, etc. And that's why a lot of Iranians I've noticed of late are trying to traced more the old Persian, or they'll try to say things like, instead of salam alaikum, which is an Arabic connotation, they'll say, I think durud. Is it durud? Is
Yep.
that correct?
Yep.
And I think that sense of identity kicking in terms of people falling in love again with their history, with their culture. When speaking Farsi, Persian, let's say Persian, how difficult is it compared to other language like, I know you don't know other languages, but you know Persian and you know English.
Hmm.
Other languages like, people say Russian's hard, Chinese is hard. They say speaking, is it, what's the Jewish language? Is it Yiddish or
Hebrew.
Hebrew? Yeah, I
Um,
think yeah.
well, or Ebri in Farsi, you would say
Yeah.
Ebri.
How does it
Um,
rank, would you
I
say?
think I've looked it up. I think it's on the easier scale. One really cool thing is written Persian is all phonetic, so it's very easy
Mm.
to learn to read, I think. But even if you don't want to learn to read and write it, I think that it's because, like I said, it has Indo-European roots. It's not this like completely different system that you have to learn. It's very similar, in terms of verb structure, noun structure. I think it's on the easier scale. What is your background with the Persian language?
So I'm half British, half Iranian. I lived in Iran. I used to speak perfect Farsi
Ah,
when I was a kid. And then I came to the United Kingdom, couldn't speak any English. Now I
how
can't
old were
speak
you?
hardly, about 7. And
Okay,
now I can't hardly speak any Farsi, but can
but you
speak perfect
understand it?
English. Bits and bobs. It's sad. It's somewhere in. I think they say for the brain to learn something new, it has to forget something.
Hmm.
It's probably up there in the computer, but it's archived.
But it's your
Maybe
mother
under
tongue. It's your
hypnosis. Hypnosis will bring it out.
Yeah, it's your original language though. I bet it would come back quickly.
Yeah, but my pronunciation sucks. That's because here in the UK, we're probably one of the worst nationalities for speaking languages.
Really?
Yeah, because English is the world's language in terms of international language.
Yes.
Laziness, maybe education stuff. Like Scandinavians, they'll speak like 4 languages and they'll
Right.
speak it like perfectly. English, like amazing.
Right.
Armenians are very good at language as well, etc. But no, we're one of the worst. When speaking Persian, the whole pronunciation of g,
Yeah, that was perfect.
yeah, is that difficult for someone learning it?
Very difficult. So even, my kids, I speak to them. I'm married to an American that only speaks English. And I think I would say the United States is worse than the UK, because at
Yeah,
least in the
probably.
UK you have more exposure to other.
Yeah.
The United States don't care. They only speak one language. But my kids even have a hard time saying "re," even though I've spoken to them in Persian from the very beginning. That's probably one of the most difficult parts. But I just tell people to keep practicing. So you got that down. That's like 50% of the hard part.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what is do you have a desire to learn, or at this point are you what's your
Um, I it's for me, in terms of having the time to learn, it's probably not there right now. Um, my fascination is with the culture, with the history, and all aspects of everything to do with Iran and Persia, etc. I've always had that from a young age,
interesting?
probably because living there, my dad. But when how long would it take someone, if they're not the best or languages, or like when you're a kid, you soak things up like a sponge. That's why
Yes.
it's so easy to do that when you're younger. When you get older, it's much more difficult. How easy is it to be able to speak, I don't know, GCC level, high school level Persian from a
Okay, so
standing
here's the
start?
thing. So I'll tell you. So I've again had this podcast since 2010. And the approach of the podcast is it's a free podcast. Anyone can listen to it. From the first lesson, we just start teaching how to speak. So, like I said, conversationally, and we teach how to say hello, how are you? Things that you just say in conversation. One of the things that I've come to realize over the years of making this podcast is that the most important thing is to just give people confidence to, even if they know only 4 words, to just use those 4 words, to say hello, just practice it, just and use those 4 words in conjunction with hand movements, with facial movements, because what is language? It's about communication. So what we've started doing, we started this maybe 7-8 years ago at this point. We started doing these boot camps that in 6 weeks, I said, I will teach you how to have a conversation in Persian. And, people were skeptical, but we give you 6 weeks worth of classes to practice. And it was really successful. People loved it. So we just kept evolving it over time. And now we have those 6-week boot camp in conjunction with live classes where you can practice with your peers. And I will tell you, it's my aunt runs the live classes, and my mom, who taught Persian for 20 years in Dallas area to kids, she sits in on the classes sometimes, and she's like, oh my gosh, at the end of the 6 weeks, I cannot believe how much people are just conversing. And one of the things is, like, I try to break through. I heard you say that your accent was bad. I think Iranians, one of the things about us is we're very critical and we're very judgmental. And maybe you have tried speaking with people and they're like, oh, John, like, so cute, like, what a funny accent, or they've even like made fun of you, and then you're like, never mind, I'm just going to focus on the food and the music, and I'm not going to bother with talking. So what we do, and we've had to work on this mentally a lot too, like my aunt, my mom, we've all had to work on being like, no judgment. Like, if Iranians are trying to speak English, we don't make fun of their accents. We say, like, oh, amazing, you're speaking English, you're doing a great job. It should be the same the other way around. If those of us in the diaspora are trying to speak Persian and we can't say our khes and our khes, no one should make fun of us. We should just be allowed to practice and make mistakes and do what we can. So, to the short answer to your question, I think in 6 weeks you can have a very good basis of having a conversation in Persian. That's my pitch to you. You can do it.
Yeah, for any of you listening to the podcast, if your Persian is rusty or you don't speak it much, 6 weeks might get you there.
And one other thing we do, I want to say, is we, in that 6 weeks, we also teach a Persian poem. So either a classical Persian poem or a modern one. And we teach how to use those words in conversation. And even if you're a complete beginner to Persian language, we teach you to say a Hafez poem. And that helps you too, just to have confidence to speak. So I really think that anyone in 6 weeks can get to some level of understanding. Not you asked about high school level. Obviously that takes longer, but not as long as you would think. It really doesn't. Even at our age, even not if you're a kid. Kids pick it up easy, but
Yeah, I mean, for most of the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, which had a lot of the Arab Crusades going through it, all of which have the Arabic language, from Tunisia, Egypt to the GCC, etc. Iran is the only one of the few only countries to have kept both its language and its culture, and therefore its identity. And that's why Iranians hold their culture and language and identity to it so dear to their hearts. And Iran is a country of poetry, isn't it? You said Hafez, Rumi, Ferdowsi, etc. It's been handed down from generation to generation. It's and a lot of other cultures look at it with you know great respect in terms of the poetry and everything that goes with it. When it comes to the Persian language and your podcast, what what made you start to do social media? Because your Instagram following, for example, you got a large following. Is a lot of your audience the diaspora that have kind of lost touch with the language, or the newer generations not quite speaking it, or is it people in Iran actually looking at what you're doing with others, etc., with some interest or curiosity?
Well, I know exactly because we have statistics that we can look at. I actually, like I said, started the podcast in 2010. I didn't start doing social media until about 2 years ago. So 2022 about is
Hmm.
when I started doing
Like
social
me.
media.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I was like, I always have a love hate relationship with social media. So I really tried to stay off of it. But so we built a big base of, our courses and the podcast and YouTube videos and all this kind of stuff a long time before getting on social media. And I always say if I had started with social media, I would have quit from the beginning because I don't know
Yeah.
how your social media is, but just the comments and people can just be so difficult on social media. But I feel like I have a strong foundation and it doesn't bother me as much when I get all these comments. But I about 10% of people that follow me right now I see are in Iran. So that's a big part of it. But the majority, because teach in English,
Hmm.
um, the people that join the courses I know, and I bet the rest of the social media followers follow into this category as well. About 30% are heritage Iranians like you and me who grew up in an Iranian and in Persian speaking household. About a third are people married to or dating Iranians. A lot of that going on. And then about a little bit less than a third are just people very interested in Iranian culture. Or after the after the Zendegi Azadi movement in Iran, um, there was a huge surge in interest in Iranian culture. So a lot of people are because of that. Um, and so some 10% from Iran actually trying to learn English from me. I see that a lot too. They say, "Can you,
Yeah.
you know, this is great. I'm learning English this way," which is really fun as well.
And what made your kind of Instagram blow up? Did you have some virality in terms of some of your Persian speaking type videos, or was it a long, hard slog?
Uh,
Because it's not easy. 2 years ago, it's not easy. People who have amassed a lot of followings on social media sites are usually early adopters or have celebrity status or they're on TV or something like that that makes them gain traction.
Well, when I started the podcast, there was no other podcast teaching Persian. So I was excited. I did it,
Mm,
and a large part of that was because, Iranians are always so misrepresented in the media. It was right after all the sanctions happened from Obama and there was all this talk of war with Iran. And I thought, okay, what can I do for our culture? I can teach the language, and this will be a way of introducing our language and our culture to people. So the podcast has always been language and culture tied very closely together. And when I started it, I thought, okay, eventually some corporation will come and they'll make a podcast way better than mine, and I will not be needed anymore. But this is my public service. Here we go. But I kept, doing the podcast slowly, making videos. I had a few like viral YouTube videos that was really fun. A few viral blog posts that was really fun. So I kept getting traction, and then I keep like looking over my shoulder, like, is anyone coming? Anyone? No one ever came. So then, same thing with the social media. I didn't want to do it, but then I saw there's no other account making content. There's so many accounts making content for French, for Spanish, and I'm
mm,
following them and I'm loving them. Fun videos showing the culture, showing the language. No one's doing it for Persian. So again, I was like, okay, I guess I'll do this. Okay, here we go. So I started making videos, and it was kind of fun for me to make these short form videos, showing I do these whiteboard videos that I love, where I show how some really fun words, like the word ham in Persian means the same. The word for a neighbor is hamsaye, which is the same shade. What a beautiful word. So I made a video showing that on a whiteboard, like ham, and then hamsar equal head means your spouse. So I made these whiteboard videos where I had the word ham and then I would change the word next to it, and then you'd get all these different meanings. Hamrah, same road, means your companion. So someone going down the same road with you, things like that. So I found that it was really fun for me, coming from an architectural background. It was fun to figure out, okay, how in a short form video do I show this concept? Do I show these words? So I just slowly started to do that, and it really caught on because there's just no other account doing it. There's no other account like focused on teaching the Persian language. Because think about it, Iran has been sanctioned for so long. People, there's not a business application for learning Persian, so there's not really corporations interested in teaching Persian. So so same, I was just trucking along with the Instagram as well, just slowly making my videos. Whenever an idea pops into my head, I write it on a Google Doc and I just make the video. And yeah, some of them do go viral, but really it's just been slow, consistent work on the Instagram as well. Just understanding that medium. And
Yeah,
I also think like I do one thing at a time and I do it well. So I started with the podcast, learned podcasting, learned all that, did it well. Okay, now I got that going. And then I started the blog. Okay, learned to write well. Okay, great, great. Got it. The course, like focus on making a course. Okay. So as long as I focus on one thing and kind of learn it, and I follow other accounts that are doing successful language teaching and see what they do, and can
because there is an Iranian woman. She does it, but for Spanish.
interesting.
Yeah, she's a
I haven't
massive
seen it.
following where she will do the same thing in terms of like the same type of word meaning like 6 or 7 different things, and she doesn't play on
Interesting.
it, but all she does is speak in Spanish. But she's
Wow.
Iranian, so it's quite clever. So, for example, with English, we have various dialects, and it can be a source of jokes, banter. So you've got the Queen's English, which is more referred to the South or
Okay.
London, etc. You've got the Brummie accent from Birmingham,
Uh-huh.
or from Manchester and stuff like that. When it comes to Persian, every country will have it, I suppose, with their own language. Is the real the posh Persian? Is it more from Tehran and then other areas, and they've got a particular accent, like, oh, that's an Esfahani, or that's someone from
Uh-huh.
Shiraz, or
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up this point. It's super important. In Iran, there are over 200 different languages. I mean, it's a very diverse, not even just accents, just languages. It's such a diverse country. But then each region has its own sweet, sweet accent. Like there's the Desfuli. Have you heard of Desfuli?
no?
That's what my father spoke, and they say it's a different language, but I mean you can understand it if you speak Persian. It's a accent. The Esfunis have a really sweet accent. People from Esfahan, really sweet Persian accent. The Shirazis have a sweet, sweet accent. Everyone, I love hearing the different accents. People from Afghanistan speak Dari. It's a totally different, it's a kind of more old school type of Persian. Tajikistan has its own version of Persian that's really sweet. Tajiki is what it's called. And so, in addition to like different languages and dialects, there are different accents as well. You're right. The standard Persian is Tehrani. That's what I speak. And so that has kind of permeated, um, unfortunately, throughout Iran. And, the government has also worked really hard to suppress those other accents, those other languages. For a long time, people were not allowed to speak different accents and different languages in schools, for example. So that's a huge problem. And, as I gain more resources with my program, I do really aspire to teach different, or just showcase different accents and languages in my show as well. So that's a really important point.
Any of the particular dialects that are very difficult to understand, like people who come from abroad when they come to the United Kingdom, if they hear a Scotsman speak English, say, sorry, can you repeat that? Because it's so thick, it's so strong, the accent.
Right. Right.
Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a
I'm
lot
purely
of them
Scottish.
are probably that way, are probably difficult for a lot of people to understand. Even like I said, desfuli that my father spoke. It's a they have some different words. Oops. Oh, am I still on? Okay, yeah. They have some different words, but also a very thick accent. So absolutely, there are some that are that way. I wish we had. I can't, like you're giving examples speaking. I can't do that. So unfortunately,
It's just years of jokes and banter. Um,
right.
so there's about what 120 million people that speak Persian across multiple countries. You'd mentioned the Tajikistan, Afghanistan, etc. Because of the Silk Road, because of the Persian Empire, and you see it with Nowruz when you know all the celebrations happen and the language, etc. That happens. Were you always aware of that fact, or is that something that, as you've done this in terms of teaching people Persian, that one often leads to another? So, for example, you discover the language, then you want to discover more about the history, and then you know everything's so interconnected. Food is interconnected with history, with language. Everything that we do. Has that been a journey for yourself? I mean, you've lived in, is it America all your life, or?
Yep, yep. Yes, I moved to Texas when I was 4. So I was born in Iran in the early 80s, and I moved to Texas when I was 4. So it's interesting that you ask that, because I feel like one thing about Iranian culture, one thing that really connects us, we have a lot of, um, because you're right, there's the Persian language in different countries, as you're saying, like Afghanistan, Tajikistan, a lot of different countries in that region. But because of this chaos event that happened, the Islamic Republic, there are so many of us outside of Iran as well. So there's Iranians everywhere, or Persian speakers, I should say, everywhere in the world right now.
Yeah,
I'm in
9 million.
Texas. It's what?
9 million. 9 million in the diaspora.
So many, exactly. Yes, yes. And like, I'm in Texas. Like, there's so many Iranians in Texas. Imagine that. If we'd said that 50 years ago, people would have been like, why? So many everywhere. And one thing that really unites us is our language, I think. Like, our language is very unique. You'd mentioned before that it survived, the Arab invasion, for example. Like, we could have been all speaking Arabic right now, but we're speaking Persian. It's because I think that, for example, the Italian diaspora here, they don't really speak Italian, but they eat Italian
Oh,
food.
really?
There's like interesting things that they do, but they've totally lost the language. I think that Iranian diaspora is going to be different in that we are going to retain, I think, a lot of our language, because people have this innate want to learn the language and the poetry, as you said. Like, the poetry is so different when you read the translation versus when you read it in the original language. There's just these things that we have in our language that I think really get people to want to learn it, and it is connected to all of our cultural things as well, like Nowruz and everything.
I think because, like Italians or Greeks and stuff, they have so much positive press,
Yes. Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So, like, so, Ferrari, Lamborghini, pasta, the art, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, all this kind of stuff. Look how
Hmm.
beautiful it is, everything else. So there might be a bit of complacency that they don't really have to go that extra yard. But I think Iranians, because and the reason why Successful Iranians was founded was because to break down the negative barriers and stereotypes around Iranians and Iran, and to highlight the great and the good of the community. Because there is a lot of that. People being ignorant, like, oh, I knew Arabs. No. Do you speak Arabic? No. And whereas with Italy and Spain and Greece and all that, they don't have that at all.
Absolutely.
So I could imagine maybe some of the generations that have been more removed from the motherland, is they just get used to just being in their circles in their lives, but they're not so hot on it. Where I think a lot of Iranians try to be as much as they can, from the food to the traditions of Nowruz, etc.,
Yep.
Yalda, and
But things
the
change,
language.
like at least in the US, the Italians were not always seen in a positive light. Or think about the
It's true.
Irish. Like the
Yeah,
Irish were very much not seen in a positive light. And now it's all about uh, leprechauns and rainbows or whatever. Things change. So we have
it's
to
the
keep
same
that in
here
mind.
in the UK. They used to in the 1970s. There was a lot of racism, and they used to have things like no Irish in pubs.
Who's going to go to the pubs then?
Yeah, yeah, and they're the king of drinking. Scottish give them a good run for their money. They're known for Guinness, and Scots are known for their whiskey. Um, and I think some of it is because of what happened with the Arab Crusades. Because I think there's a word in Arabic that they used to refer to Persians as ajam, which means mute. And the reason being is that it's been said that when Persians at that time was trying to speak Persian, their tongues used to be cut off,
Wow.
or there would be serious repercussions. And because they refer it as ajam, meaning mute, meaning they can't speak,
Mm,
they had to speak Arabic because of Islam and the Crusades. And I think that's carried from generation to generation in terms of Iranians' fight to retain identity and culture, and fundamentally the language,
hmm
because of that suppression for 1400 years or so.
hmm
Just something I've thought about, because I think every culture has it, but in terms of trying to retain their identity and everything. But I think in life, when you've been put through stuff, or it's been hard or difficult adversity, you remember that, and you try to you don't forget, and you try to build something that retains the important stuff. When it comes to um, like languages, for example, Spanish people often tell me, "Oh, Latin Americans speaking Spanish, they don't speak it correctly.
hmm
They're not like our Spaniards, etc." And they have some countries which they favour a little bit more than others. There's a lot of people from Argentina that go to Spain, for example, tend to go to Barcelona or Madrid. I think Chile obviously speaks Spanish. Most of Latin America speaks Spanish, apart from Brazil, which is Portuguese because of the Portuguese Empire and Portugal. Do Iranians have that with people like from Afghanistan and Tajikistan? So,
Yep.
yeah, I thought so.
Is there a question there, Johnny?
No, it just
Because I have some
things like,
thoughts. Yes.
yeah, go on.
Okay. Yes, there is a lot of that, and just as we point out racism in other cultures in the UK and in the US, I think we have to be cognizant of that with ourselves. And I see a lot of that in things that I post. There's a lot of fighting. If you go in any of my posts, recent posts especially, that have kind of blown up, there are people calling each other names and yelling at each other and just going at it about, oh, this is how we say it in Afghanistan. Your language isn't really Farsi. You're this, that, that, blah, 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 and it gets very hateful and very, very, very bad very quickly. And that's my least favorite thing to see, because I feel like we are fighting all these negative stereotypes, as you're saying, from around. Like, we should not be doing that amongst ourselves. We should be saying, cool, how do you guys say it? Oh, that's so funny. Like this, not it funny, that's so sweet, this is how we say it. That's so nice, okay, this is how we say it. And ask each other questions and learn from each other. We're all going to say things differently. We speak different dialects, we speak different languages, and that's what makes it a rich culture. The official language of India used to be Persian. So in court documents, in uh, court proceedings, or any official language had to be in Persian. When the British came in, they said, okay, let's divide them. Now it's going to be English, and let's erase this history and let's make them not like each other. And I feel like there's a lot of that, I have so many students that are actually from India and Pakistan. Urdu and Persian are very close together. They want to learn. There's just all this infighting, though, of people saying, well, you don't, in Hindu it's like this, you don't speak it properly, you're like this, da da da. And it's so frustrating to me. I think let's all learn from each other. Let's be excited that everyone wants to learn Persian. Let's embrace the fact that there's different versions. Just like in Spanish, there's so many different versions, and that's what makes it colorful and nice. It could be the same for Persian. Let's not put each other down. That's my PSA.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but once you go Persian, there's no other version. And but the reality is, prejudices will always be there somehow, some way. We got it in the
Yes.
UK,
Yes.
in terms of schools that you've gone to
Yes.
universities, and people from the north used to feel it a lot with their accents, like
Yes.
in the south, they're such snobs, or
Right.
Parisians. The rest of France, like I remember someone in Marseille used to say, "Oh, that people from Paris, they're such snobs," and it's not like us down here, etc. So I think as long as it doesn't get toxic,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Um, so, what's the dream to what you're doing? What's the dream?
Well, I think that the dream for all of us is for the Islamic Republic to meet its demise, and for us all to go to Iran and be there with our beautiful culture and our beautiful people.
Have you ever been
I
back?
Have I been back? I haven't been back since 2009. I
But,
used to, so I left when I was 3.5,
yeah.
but I just had this yearning always to go back. And I did think after I graduated architecture school, I actually did a joint program with Harvard where there was Nader Tehrani, who currently has an office in Boston. He worked at Harvard. He was a professor at Harvard. He had a program where he would send world-class architects to Iran because Iranian students couldn't travel abroad. So this way he would bring them to Iran to meet with the students, to do some workshops, and he would take the architect to travel Iran as well. So I got to go on one of these trips with a Peruvian architect, and it was really wonderful and kind of life changing. We traveled through Yazd and went to the different deserts and really got to see beautiful Iranian architecture, and the architecture students. I don't know what happened. It said the recording had stopped.
Don't know. I'll just add this to that bit. I don't know what happened there. How weird.
Yeah. Okay, so I aspired to go back and work there as an architect, but then I went back and I lived there. I didn't have really any close family there. My parents divorced when I was small, so I had some of my father's family there, and I was staying with them. I didn't know them too well, but I aspired to go live there and work as an architect, and bring my knowledge from the West to Iran. But it was this thing where every time I would leave the house I had to wear that hijab, and I was
Mm.
reminded I was a girl, and people would look at me like this and whatever. It was just an inhospitable environment, and I realized that then, and I was like, I can't do this. And then Ahmadinejad was elected. I was there, I think, the first time he was elected, and the first day that he was there, the cafes were buzzing with people, and people were feeling very free, and it was really nice. And then the first day he was in office, he took the chairs away from the cafes so that girls and boys couldn't sit at cafes and like have fun anymore. So that was the first day, and I realized it's just an inhospitable environment, and I couldn't live there for a long term. And then 2009 happened, and the Green Movement happened, and they stole the election, and this and that and that. And so I haven't been back since, and I haven't been back since 2009. I was like, I can't do this. And so I would love to go back. I would love for, I was very hopeful during the women life freedom movement. And I'd love to go back, but I think that my hope right now is that this, it felt like there was a lot of unity in the diaspora, and that has completely fallen apart. I hope that we all go back to that original mantra of women, life, freedom, and keep our eye on that goal, and that we all work together to really bring the change that we want to see in Iran. I mean, there's so many people in Iran, and there's so many of us outside of Iran that want the same thing. So my dream is that we come together, just keep repeating woman, life, freedom, and really making this change in Iran so that we can all go back and speak Persian and eat kebab and experience the beautiful music there, and the beautiful humanity there, and the deserts and the sea, and the all the beauty that there is in Iran. That is my dream.
We actually had Hadid Tehrani on the podcast.
Yeah.
One of the episodes, you'll find it. Interesting guy, successful guy. At first, he didn't want to come on because of his English, but we got there in the end. Okay, so before I finish, as we wrap up, Gorma Sabzi or Kalas?
Oh, Horma Sabzi. I don't know. Those people are crazy.
Good. Absolutely. It's been
That's my
wonderful.
toxic. I'm like, they're wrong.
Yeah, they're wrong. What's the best socials for people to reach out?
Oh, I'm most active on Instagram. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm most active on Instagram. I always say my true self is on Twitter or X. But that's where you'll see my all I do is yell at the Texas government there, but and talk about bikes and things like that. That is my true self. But Instagram is where I do most of my like work for China conversation and things. But I would like to ask you a question to end. How do you define, what is your definition of a successful Iranian? The name of your podcast. What is success to you?
Yeah, people have said that a few times. And for me, it's all relative success. So it depends on the pack of cards you dealt with. Not everyone could be a Jeff Bezos. Not everyone could be Elon Musk. Not everyone could be a Roger Federer. But it's about fulfilling your potential, what that might be. And I think everybody has a talent. The reason why most people don't fulfill it is because they don't know their own gold, they don't know their own worth, and two, they don't optimize it. So, success ultimately, for me, my definition is to have a meaningful life, which is one, to have meaningful relationships, which is having a partner in life, good friends. You're lucky to count your good friends on one hand after the age of 35 and moving upwards. Second is to have a meaningful career, right? Because you spend so much time at work, and what affects us in our professional life affects us in our personal life. And lastly, try to make a difference. But we can all make a difference. Even that elderly person that might be all alone and they only see you and you interact with them and it's made their day, etc. And I think sometimes we associate difference with big and grand. And in terms of the podcast, I interview people who I find interesting, making impact, disruptors, great life stories, incredible accomplishments in whatever field that I can have a good conversation with.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. You're doing good work.
You're most welcome. And this has been Successful Iranians. Thank you.
All right. And you should come learn a poem with us.
Why is it not stopping? Oh, weird. I can't stop it. Usually I can press this symbol here.
Yeah.
It's just saying starting. What does that
Ooh, do
mean?
we not? Well, it's saying it's recording. It should be
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, it's been recording.
So upload 99%. This is bizarre. I've never
It,
had this before.
that's strange.
Because
But it should
every
be
time
fine.
I press this button,
It's a start. Do you have
oh, I'm just
someone edit it or do you do it yourself?
no. I do a lot of it myself. It's a labor of love.
Yeah. And then
Um,
your
as you
your
know,
main
doing a
job is a
podcast is not
coach?
easy, is it?
No.
People
But
don't realize.
you're a coach? Is that what you do mainly?
And headhunting, global headhunter.
Okay.
Been doing that for a long time. God, continuously uploading your high. How I have never ever had this.
That's really strange.
I'm just wondering if we leave, what happens to it? I hope it
It'll
saves.
it'll upload. It's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
All right. Let's leave then.
All right. Well, good to
Strange.
talk to you.
Lovely having you.
But send me your email address and I'll add you I'll send you a poem to learn.
Okay. All right. Take care, Layla.
All right, bye.
Cheers. Bye.